Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 507.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because what it comes down to is that you and I, we go out there, we do our absolute level best to lead our organizations the best way that we know how. Obviously, we spend a lot of time and effort marketing and strategy and figuring out how to acquire our customers, keep our customers, firing and hiring the right team, and making sure that as we continue on this path, as we build our cash flow, the goal is to become bigger, better versions of ourselves and let our companies grow up into the big behemoths that we all think about from time to time. Unfortunately, during that process, one thing gets neglected a lot. And what is that? It's our health. It's something that I think we should all take more seriously, but it's also a place where you may find an ability to increase that net profit, that money that you're trying to take home. It's actually it's there. So I think today's guest is going to help you and I understand how we can begin to view healthcare, and entrepreneurship in the healthcare industry in a completely different way, because that's kind of like what he does. He's got 2 books on the subject, The CEO Guide to Restoring the American Dream and The Opioid Crisis Wake-Up Call. You may know him as David Chase. Today, we're going to get to know him as our friend and mentor, and he's going to be the person that takes us down this path that hopefully helps us in this area that I think, like I said, I think we're just not paying enough attention to it. And now on this episode, you and I get to become just a little bit better. So help me welcome none other than Dave Chase. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Really looking forward to our chat. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad that you're able to make the time, because that is always the challenge these days. But before we get too far started, I want to ask you the same question that I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
Yep.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, like Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them, as an entrepreneur, occasionally I can envision myself flying around town, using our products and services, saving our customers one sale at a time. And yes, I'm probably wearing a cape at that moment. Also, though, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. So if you take, say, Spider-Man, there was a time where he was just a kid, going to school, doing his thing, paying attention to nobody, taking some photos, and trying to earn some pizza money. Then one day he gets bit by a spider, discovers, hey, I've got a special ability, and he gets to choose whether to use it for good or for evil. So my question to you is as follows. Before you're founding or being a co-founder at Avado and selling your company to, WebMD and doing that, before, working in consulting roles with LiveRes, MarketLeader, WhatCounts, before your 2 books, even before everything that we know you for today, what we want to know is, who is Dave Chase?
Well, I'm a congenital optimist, but I'm also a straight shooter. And, something that really was foundational for me was the way I was raised. And, that kind of maybe that superhero experience, that kind of the genesis of this journey was, as you mentioned, I started out my career in consulting. I was working inside of hospitals and working on something that the fancy term for it is revenue cycle management. It's just the simple way to describe it is, how do you get as big a bill out as fast as possible and get paid as fast as possible? And, one time that was a reasonable thing where hospitals just wanted to, avoid forgetting to bill for something. But instead, it's become the root of a scheme that has created a economic depression for the working and middle class in this country that's 20 years long. And once I learned about that, the way I was raised was if you see a wrong and you don't do something about it, you're complicit. And so that really put me on a journey to where I am today. And we'll probably get into that a little bit more.
Okay, I mean, you threw out a term there that I know I've never heard, and I'm just going to assume there's a few thousand people listening right now who are like, revenue cycle, what? Well,
yep.
What is? Because it sounded like what you said. Like if I was to interpret what you just said, it sounded like you said there's an entire industry just designed to make sure that hospitals can bill us as fast as possible and collect as soon as possible. Like that's what I heard. Is that accurate?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And there's a pretty sizable industry of people doing exactly that.
Like that's their job, just trying to figure out how to get the bill to us as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, and it's one where healthcare has all kinds of crazy schemes for how you can bill stuff, and so there's all kinds of ways to kind of trick the system to generate a larger bill, frankly. And they're well aware that, unfortunately, most employers have been asleep at the wheel and not really watched what's going on. And even though the employer-paid healthcare part of the healthcare industry is about half of the dollars, basically, if you're not low income or elderly, you typically get your benefits through your job. It's about half of the revenue of the industry, which is massive. That's like we're talking about $1.7 trillion when you talk about half the industry. Yet it's responsible for probably 70 to 80% of the industry profits because of basically employers not paying attention to it. So you want to drive cash flow, you start to manage healthcare like you manage everything else in your business, where you put on that problem-solving hat. And if I have a superpower, it's that I generate hope. Where a lot of people, see, they look at healthcare and like, they just want to put their fingers in their ears and go, this is like trying. I know it's broken, but it seems like it's like trying to solve Middle East peace, and I'd like that solved too, but I don't know how I could do it. And so, I give people hope, and it's not sort of wishful thinking. It's based on hundreds of companies all over the country, large and small, urban, rural, you name it. And they've slayed the healthcare cost beast, and I just give them the tools on how to do it.
Awesome. You heard it here, folks. We have Dave Chase, Hope Dealer. I love it. So now when I have so many questions right now, but before I get down into the questions, I got to know, how does one wake up one day and go, okay, I know what I want to do. I want to take on healthcare. Like, what is the journey? Yeah, I don't think you just woke up one morning and said that, or did you? Yeah,
well, it was really a combination of one overwhelming thing, which unfortunately, by the time I was in my late 30s, I'd had 10 friends who were my age or younger die. And obviously, all of those are a gut punch. But the last one was particularly brutal, where this was a friend of mine who'd reached the top levels of Silicon Valley. She should have had access to the best our healthcare system had to offer and was in a financially strong position. But basically, our healthcare system failed her in every way and devastated her medically, psychologically, and financially. Ultimately, she died because she didn't get the proper diagnosis and care. She was a single mother, left behind a 10-year-old daughter with basically nothing after having had a lot of success. I mean, that was brutal. And it wasn't that long after that where I was outside of a grocery store and some kid came up to me selling candy bars for a fundraiser at their school. I was like, oh, great. You're raising money for a band tour, or, what is it? Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, no, we need supplies in our science department. And I'm like, what? Like, taxes paid for that stuff when I was a kid. Right. In fact, that was something where, it's interesting I started my K-12 years in California at a time when it was widely regarded to have the best public schools in the country. And it's gotten so bad, Bill Gates devoted an entire TED Talk to how healthcare has devastated education. He used California data. And today, California has the lowest graduation rates, the highest student-to-teacher ratio, and we can thank healthcare for that. And that was like, when you have those sort of situations, like with your friends, you're like, you know what, this is awful, but I'm going to try to make some good out of it. And if I have one unique facet to my career, it's I'm an industry ecosystem thinker and shifter. I've done that a couple times, and it's fairly unique. And I realized, you know what, if you look at the great societal challenges that we've had and been tackling and continue to tackle, whether it's civil rights or better food or climate change, these things always get solved bottom up. Now, eventually the politicians will run to the front of the parade. But, you take these things and people realize the cavalry's not coming from D.C. We can fix it. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of it is it's impossible to stop once people do have hope and they have the tools. There's no legislation that's needed. They can do it.
Now, okay. I mean, I hear this and I understand the how the seed gets planted, but there's something else that I think you're skipping over that's really huge, because you had to develop, and it had to come from somewhere, the courage to take on something. There are many people who have the capacity to recognize, oh, here's a problem. Oh, let me do, I'll do my small little part. I'll volunteer on the weekend, etc. Okay, cool, conscience cleared, but that wasn't enough for you. You had to do more, and you believe and have made the change. Where does that belief, where does that come from?
Well, you hit the right word, belief. Fundamentally, I have a very strong faith, and I'm one that believes you're given gifts, and you're meant to use those gifts. And you know what? I actually have seen industry shift. I have a lot of media background, yet I know the idiosyncrasies and sort of secrets of healthcare without being shackled by them. And to me, it was a matter of just conscious. You can't not do it when you see a problem this bad. And I look at our failure scenario as we only reach 10 million people, and we're almost halfway there. And I think we'll reach a lot more than 10 million people with what we're doing, and have every intention of doing that. But 10 million is a lot better than 0 million. So I'm not going to let, that be, slow us down. So to me, it's incredibly easy to get up and work on this. And it's not just about me by any stretch, because essentially what I was finding with my last startup, any startup is about finding a market gap, right? And
absolutely.
And I sometimes joke, I went looking for a market gap, and I found the greatest heist in American history. And what I found was people solving that heist, and it was just incredible. If you have a minute, I have to tell you the Rosen story. It's just an incredible story. Yeah. So this is a pull yourself up by the bootstraps entrepreneur, hotelier, bought a failing motel in the depths of the oil crisis in the early 70s. And he was going along fine until about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. And all of a sudden, healthcare costs started just eating into his business. And he's going, wait a second, this is a guy who watches every penny. Mm-hmm. And, there's a number of things he did. But fast forward, today, this is a company at the time that they'd had this sort of awakening. They had 500 employees. Now they've got 5,000. They have the best benefits package in the entire country. And I was at Microsoft during their heyday. It's better than that. They not only have incredible health benefits, they pay for their employees' kids' college education and the employees' college education themselves. And they spend less than half of what a typical company spends on healthcare. So over this period of time, they've saved something like $350 million on healthcare costs that they've put in to grow the business, put into these incredible benefits. And by the way, this is a challenging workforce from a disease burden perspective. 56% of their pregnancies are categorized high risk, which could be a budget buster. And if all that wasn't just amazing enough, they adopted a nearby formerly crime-ridden neighborhood and said, we're going to invest in kids and education. So they partnered with local organizations like the Y and Boys and Girls Club and really put in resources into daycare, pre-K, after-school programs. So far, they've fully funded 450 college educations. Crime went down over 60%. High school graduation rates more than doubled from 45% to nearly 100%. The entire investment was less than 5% of what they've saved. So now they have adopted a neighborhood 5 times that size, and they're doing it again. That's what's possible. It's great for their business, amazing for their employees. You can imagine their turnover. It's 1/6 of a typical hotelier. And what an incredible impact on the community just by being a problem solver. This guy didn't know anything about healthcare, but he was just pissed and said, I'm going to solve this. And they did it.
Wow. I mean, and I just want to make sure I heard that right. Did you say they paid for the kids' college too?
Yes. Yeah. After 3 years of service, they pay for the employee's kids' college educations. After 5 years of service for the employee. But then in that neighborhood, any kid who graduates from high school, they will pay for a public education, whether it's a 4-year university or a junior college or whatever. So just incredible what they've done.
That's amazing on a whole new level. And I'm just sitting here thinking about that sounds like the dream. Every employer wants to be able to do things like that. I would love to be able to do things like that, like what you're talking about. So, okay, let's get into it then. Because you said earlier that you work with, large and small, but how small? I mean, some of us listening, we may only have 10, 15 employees or 5 or whatever. How small is small where the difference can actually be made?
Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/cashflowdiary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
If you're one or more, you qualify. And so you have different tools, of course, you can bring to the table. If you're a large organization, there's a whole scheme around becoming self-insured, and about 2/3 of the employed people in this country are in companies that are self-insured. But if you're in a 5-person company, you might use, for example, there's these things called Health Share or MediShare. There's some that are religious-based. There's now some secular-based ones. And they're technically not insurance, but a lot of times people, confuse health care from health insurance. I mean, you don't say, you get your auto from Geico. You say, well, I bought a Ford or I bought a, Toyota or whatever. And so it covers basically the same things. And what's amazing is these, typical family of 4 will pay over $20,000 a year for health benefits, for basically pretty sucky benefits. Whereas what you pay even at the highest level for these organizations, you'll pay about $500 a month for a family of four. So, $6,000 versus over $20,000. And so, a small, sole proprietor or tiny business might do that. Let's say you're 50 or 100 employees, then you should become self-insured. And there's another set of things that I outline in my book as to what you can do and what the tools are available to you.
Wow. You're actually making healthcare interesting. I appreciate that. That's a hard thing to do. I mean, because you kind of said it earlier, because, people put fingers in the air and they kind of check out. I can only imagine that you have to deal with the fact that half of the marketplace feels like it's a foregone conclusion, man. Why are you trying? Dave, why not just, seriously, Dave, really healthcare? What else you got?
Yeah. Well, as I tell people, you're in the healthcare business whether you like it or not. That's what we have in this country. It's an employer-based healthcare system. And so my point is, you're in that business, make it thrive. It's typically your second or third biggest cost after payroll. So why, the same organization that will reject, a expense report, missing a $76, restaurant receipt, will pay sight unseen a six-figure hospital bill, and, another great example of this is a pretty small organization. I think they have about 50 people. What they do is they say, well, who's the best bill checker, in the world? Well, it's the patient and their family, because they were actually there. You can have third parties do it. And they said, if you find an error in a bill that we were going to pay, and we don't pay it, we're going to give you 20% of that. Well, one of their employees, they found a $200,000 error. They were going to pay it. The employer was going to pay it.
Nice.
And it was just bogus. And so this person was making $50,000 a year. They pulled out the Ed McMahon check, $40,000 they gave her. And, everybody in that company started scouring through their bills. Maybe they weren't going to find $200,000, but I tell you, having been involved in hospital billing departments, I don't think there's been a hospital bill over $5,000 that's ever gone out without an error. And so you just have to pay attention.
Okay. All right. So you're painting this picture that I need more insight into, because right now I tend to be more of a cash patient, because I don't trust a lot. So I'm like, and I know I can negotiate my bills that way, because it works that way for me. But because you referred to a heist and you're referring to errors. So tell us, what are they doing? What is going on that you're fighting against? Help us understand exactly.
Probably the number one thing is what we call pricing failure. And the notion of a pricing failure is there's no connection between what you pay and the value you receive. If you spend, $20,000 on a car versus $100,000 on a car, you're going to get something quite different. In healthcare, if there's any correlation, it might actually be reverse correlation, where a lot of times the places that are most expensive have the lowest quality. And so, number one, a lot of times it's not even changing the doctor. Let's say you have a surgery. It's just getting them to do it in one venue versus another. And one where that venue doesn't have the rates of complications that, say, maybe a hospital has, or hospital-acquired infections. So there's big problems just if you focus there. And typically what employers do is they'll work with, either they'll have a great primary care organization that's sort of their, Sherpa, or they'll have kind of a concierge that will help them navigate the system and say, hey, let's get you to the high quality places. And then part of high quality is not doing procedures that shouldn't be done. Starbucks did a study for their employees. Mm-hmm. They found that fully 90% of the spinal procedures that they were doing didn't help at all. PT would have been more effective. And so you're talking about the risk of a surgery. A lot of times people are given opioids during or after the procedure. So you have the risk of addiction from that. They're incredibly expensive. And I tell you, some of these procedures, we're going to be looking at them in a few years like, lobotomies and bloodletting. Most of them don't work. Look, talk to Steve Kerr. He'll tell you. And he should have had access to the best spine surgeons, and he is physically wrecked.
You're talking about the basketball player?
Yeah, the coach for the Warriors. Yeah.
Well, in my head, he's still a player.
Yeah, he's still the Bulls player.
Yeah,
right?
He's still a player more than he's a coach. But yeah.
Yeah, that's Steve Kerr. So he, or Tiger Woods. I mean, he's been wrecked for a lot of his career because of these surgeries that often do more harm than good. And here's a crazy stat for you: 2% of the entire U.S. economy is squandered in musculoskeletal procedures. So that's just bones and joints. So that's back procedures, knee procedures, hip, etc. 2% are tied up in non-evidence-based, non-value-add procedures. So they're like the ones I just gave you an example of, and there's knee examples. There's many of that because essentially 50% of the procedures that are going on out there, there's no evidence that that's the most effective way to treat them. The back issue is a really good example. 80% of adults are going to have a lower back pain issue at some point in their adult life, and it's a mechanical issue, and a lot of times either a drug's being given like an opioid, or there's some procedure done. And if you actually don't get at the underlying issue, it's just going to come back. You can mask the issue for a little bit, but they just don't work most, like I said, 90% of the time. There's a time and a place for some of those procedures, but most of the time it's not. And that's another way. Like, who wants to go under the knife? But I'll tell you, having had that experience, if it feels like a knife in your back and you're told that, this is the option and you're not told of other options, you'd probably do it. And that's unfortunately what a lot of people do.
Interesting. How did it get this way? Obviously, so many questions.
Yeah.
I'm having an experience right now, Dave. You're taking me on this journey, and I'm just like, whoa, what?
Yeah. No, I've infected you, and I apologize for that. But, I would say as far as the employer arena, the way it's happened is one where at one time, healthcare costs were, maybe the cost of your, annual Christmas party or bonus. It just was a small thing. And the CEO said to the HR person, hey, keep our people happy, don't get us sued. And, maybe it was 2% of payroll. Now it's 20% of payroll. Just basically the power of compound interest. When you increase cost, 5 to 20% every year for 20, 30 years, here we are, where it's close to a fifth of the economy, and it's responsible for why the middle class has had 20 years of wage stagnation, not because employers aren't spending a lot more money on employees. The problem is all the dollars have gone to healthcare.
Okay.
And so
hold on.
That's really,
you so, all right. There are a couple of things that you have tied to healthcare in this conversation. You just tied wages. You said, there was an issue surrounding, I guess something to do with poverty, et cetera. Or no, you used the word economic depression, and that's been going for 20 years. Help us understand, because what it sounds like, and again, I'm just interpreting what I'm hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what it sounds like you're saying is like you're saying, hey, Mr. Employer, you could have better people, paying them higher wages, and having more profit if you were actually paying attention to the bottom line of your whole healthcare situation. That's what I'm hearing.
Exactly. You look at Caterpillar, a giant employer. All they've done is just focused on their pharmaceutical spend, and they haven't seen their healthcare costs go up in a decade. I have a whole chapter in my book on how in the real market, like the market you were talking about, the cash-based market, as well as direct contracts, healthcare costs haven't gone up in 5 to 10 years. You wouldn't know that. Prices have gone up. Premiums have gone up, and I break down why that is. But if you think about it, talk to your doctor friends, your nurse friends. Have the underlying costs, are they getting paid twice what they were paid 10 years ago? No. Have sutures, have implants. The underlying costs, other than, marble entryways and waterfalls and hospital entryways, the underlying costs haven't gone up. So in the real market, which is actually very substantial now with a lot of people in high deductible plans, the prices haven't gone up in a long time. And I have a bunch of data in the book that breaks it down. And so when you actually pull that out and say, okay, we're going to manage this, just like Rosen or any number of the other case studies I have in the book, it becomes a pretty straightforward thing, just like everything else in your supply chain in your business.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's clearly something that I've never spent the amount of time that you've spent, admittedly, thinking about this, or even considering that it was a manageable expense. I know inside either our properties, I'm always looking at, expense ratios and saying, hey, what can we manage better? But the idea of taking the healthcare piece on in the ways that you're talking about is like, it was like, it's one of those things. It's like, it's sales tax. Everybody pays it. What are you going to do?
Right.
You just move on. So for those that have listened this far and want to find out more, follow up more, or having the same experience that I'm having, like, what? And they want to know more about what's going on, what's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you in the future?
Yeah, probably the best way is just go to healthrosetta.org. I actually make our book available for a free download there so people can try it. I mean, if they want to read the whole thing on a PDF, that's fine too. And there's links to buy it if you want. And it really goes through the details. And I'll warn people, I've had people tell me that they need to take a shower after every 2 or 3 chapters when they learn what's going on. And so it's there. It's just been this kind of secret hiding in plain sight that most people just had not paid attention to.
Got it. Wow. I definitely appreciate the work that you're doing. And I think a lot of people are going to and have and will continue to we're helping you hit to that goal of exposing this information to as many people as humanly possible. But before we end, I've got a final question for you that I would love to get your thoughts on, because there's a listener or two out there who's listened this far and they're going, you know what? I'm going to, champion my cause too, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs are cause driven, et cetera. And we've got a mission that we're on and we want to accomplish the goal in some way, shape or form. And they've said, you know what? Dave can do it. I can do it. Yes, this is going to happen for me. And like I know, Dave, that when we reach those moments of decision, oftentimes we have a companion that comes in the form of a voice. And that voice can remind us of how it didn't work last time and no one's going to listen to you. And I'm seriously, you're going to take on healthcare? Who are you to think you're going to take on it? And for some people, they're related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. They're actually going to follow through. They're going to do what you suggest, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
Well, I would suggest that if they have somebody they work with that is their benefits broker, unfortunately, the benefits broker pitches themselves as a buyer's agent, but they're paid like a seller's agent. That's a big problem. And so you have to work with the right people, and they're out there, but there's a good chance if your healthcare costs have gone up in the last 5 or 10 years, you're not working with the right person. And so that is a really foundational piece. And, we list them, we basically certify these people that are kind of the next generation of benefits brokers, benefits consultants. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like the stockbroker that went the way of the dodo bird. Those smart ones reinvented themselves as wealth and financial advisors. Same thing's going on here. You have people who have the right alignment with your interests. You got to work with them.
Got it. Totally understood. I definitely appreciate the like I said, the information that you're sharing, the cause that you are undertaking, like you're just like, hey, this is what's going on, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows about it. And yeah, I mean, that takes, you're a special human being for doing so, and we appreciate that for sure. I love cases where you can enable us as entrepreneurs to actually take care of our people, who will then therefore take care of the business in so many ways. And that's amazing. And I thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary, sir.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed the chat and look forward to any future conversations we might have.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means healthrosetta.org. Because you know you had an experience today. You heard me have the experience in real time. Like, what is happening? What's going on? Now you have the tools to do something about it. Just think about it. What would your employees say? What would your team say if you were able to give them the best care? Would they perform better? Would the business do better? I think the answer is absolutely. Well, now you know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.